Good morning. My name is Keith Zaromsky, and I have the honor and privilege of being the Social Science Division Chair here at Crowder College. I'd like to welcome you to our annual Constitution Day event to kick off Constitution Week with our General Assembly Candidate Forum. This week on campus, we will have our Constitution Week that we will recognize the United States Constitution through various activities outside of the classroom for students and staff and community members alike. In the fireside room at 6 p.m., students are invited to watch 4 constitutional movies with questions relating to the Constitution to be shared with popcorn and candy and drinks provided. Through the week, we'll have our General Assembly Candidate Forum today. Tuesday and Thursday, the Crowder Speech and Debate team will be debating 2 constitutional issues. And on Wednesday, in the Student Center from 9 to 2, we will have voter registration. Should you not be able to register to vote on Wednesday, please be sure to register to vote by October 10th to be able to vote in the general election in November. For our General Assembly Candidate Forum today, our goal is to further the Crowder College mission of building civil, serving, literate, learning community of responsible citizens. For those of you here today, I'd really like to focus on the first and last trait. In civil, this is a candidate forum that's very different from a debate where we will be going back and forth, different from a rally. It is a time to consider yourselves employers. After all, the candidates up here are looking to represent you. You will be the ones interviewing them and hiring them. Having said that, in conducting ourselves in a behavior becoming of an employer, we look to keep this as a civil event. We don't all have to agree, but we can agree that we each have the opportunity to speak and to be heard. In Crowder College's belief in servant leadership, there's a difference between hearing and listening. For example, I heard my wife recently say, "We haven't been out on a date in a while." But had I been listening, she's telling me to take her out on a date. What I'm encouraging all of attendants to do is to listen, not pay attention to the party affiliated with the candidate, not with what somebody else has already told you, not just to hear what's being said, but to listen. Having said that, for those students of you who are not aware, the General Assembly is Missouri's legislative branch. The Capitol in Jefferson City holds the General Assembly that is set up very similar to our U.S. Congress. With that, questions today we ask to be guided to the General Assembly in which these candidates look to fill spots. Thus, questions on North Korea, Supreme Court nominees, or other national issues, we're going to look to have discussions outside of the forum today. Questions that would apply tie into those that affect us at the state level that these potential representatives and state senators could influence. With that, today we have invited 3 different open seat races. We have the 159 House District that is largely towards McDonald County. This is one of the tax districts for Crowder College. You will notice where the C is at, it is just outside of the campus property. However, it is a tax district that pays towards the college. With the 160th district that we are currently in, you will notice that the district bows down to include the campus. This is the other House race that we will feature. Being a bicameral chamber, we have the Missouri State Senate, and our campus is featured in the 32nd State Senate District. Hence, these are the 3 races that we have elected to invite here today. With that, we are going to allow each of the candidates to have a 5-minute introduction with the 2 candidates who could not be here to have the opportunity to read a statement that they have provided in advance. After their introductions, we will open it up to questions through the blank note cards that you have on your chairs. These note cards, you can write your questions and you can direct them to a specific candidate or to all of the candidates. At the given time, you may hold it up and the director of the Lee Library, Mr. Eric Dethridge, will come around to collect them and bring them up to my division colleagues, Dr. Dina Clymer and Dr. George David Schiffler, to be able to help go through these questions. All questions will not have the opportunity to be heard due to time constraints. and potentially repetitious questions. We are looking to make sure that we have appropriate questions for the General Assembly purposes and to make sure that we are able to finish in a timely manner. At the end, we will allow each candidate to have a 1-minute closing prior to our ending at 1:45. But before we begin, it would behoove us to remember those in this room who not only are here, but actually took an oath to defend the Constitution, even if it meant with their lives. If you are a veteran of the United States military, I invite you now to please stand and be recognized. Going in numerical and alphabetical order, I will first invite Mr. Dirk Deaton from the 159th District, Republican candidate, to introduce himself at the podium.
Watch it. Good way to start. Good afternoon. I want to thank Crowder College for hosting us here today, Mr. Zaromsky for his leadership in having me here today, having all of us here. Most of all, though, I'd like to express my thanks to all of you for being here today. I am Dirk Deaton. I'm the Republican nominee for the 159th District. I have lived and worked in the area of the district my entire life. I received my bachelor's degree from Liberty University, where I focused on the study of theology. Before receiving my degree from Liberty, though, I did attend here at Crowder College and Missouri Southern. Now, understanding there will be a time for questions later on, and seeing as this is Constitution Day, I thought it would be appropriate if I made a few remarks on the Constitution itself and what I think about it, how I feel about it. And I do think this will be rather informative as to how I'd conduct myself as a legislator. Of course, the Constitution was adopted at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia on September 17th, 1787. After some time, all the states ratified this new Constitution, which replaced the Articles of Confederation. This rather short document, the Constitution, established a government that was limited in nature with clearly defined and enumerated powers. It was to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So how then do I understand the Constitution? Well, of course, I take the correct view, which for me is originalism or textualism. Now, originalism is simply the understanding that the Constitution means what it meant when it was adopted. It means not to inject your own meaning, your desired outcome into the Constitution. It means asking, what did the words say? What did they mean? And how were they intended by those who had drafted and ratified the language? There are other interpretive theories as it relates to the Constitution, to be sure. I wish to say something, for example, about strict constructionism, but time won't allow me in this brief introduction, though if you'd like to ask a question about that or my thoughts on strict constructionism, I'd be glad to share my view. Though I believe the most insidious interpretive theory as it relates to the Constitution today is this notion of the living Constitution. Now, that's the notion that the Constitution morphs and changes, that it's this evolving document changing again with the times. What it meant yesterday is not necessarily what it means today or will mean tomorrow. The best example of this is the death penalty. There are persons, academics, even Supreme Court justices, who have held the view that under the Eighth Amendment, and the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment, the death penalty is unconstitutional. But I submit to you the death penalty cannot be unconstitutional, at least not based upon the Eighth Amendment. By that, I mean for not one moment did anyone ever believe that the death penalty was included in cruel and unusual punishment when the Eighth Amendment was ratified. This is unquestionably true based upon the fact that death was the penalty for a felony at the time. And you can also consider and look at the Fifth Amendment, which says you cannot be deprived of life without due process of law. But of course, that necessarily means that one can be deprived of life with due process of law. The Constitution and its meaning should endure. It should not change at the whim of unelected judges. This is yet another form of despotism, and that is my problem with this notion of a living, a changing, an evolving Constitution. It should also be noted that we don't accept this approach in any other area of our lives, and rightfully so. Take the situation many of you find yourselves in here today. Say you walk into your class tomorrow, and your professor says, look, there's going to be an exam today, it's worth 100% of your grade, and it covers nothing we've ever covered, nothing related to this course. Now you'd object, you'd say that's wrong, and after all, there's no such thing listed in the syllabus. Ah, but your professor says, see, the syllabus has been breathing recently, it's been changing, see. But we would not accept that in such an instance there. We shouldn't accept it with constitutional interpretation either. Now please understand me. It's not that I think law should never change, it should change. But it should change through the appropriate process. You want to abolish the death penalty? Fine. Convince your fellow citizens it's the right thing to do. Pass a law to that end. But we shouldn't change the meaning of the words of the Constitution to fit our desired outcome. Such a method is not worthy of a republic or a free people, and I don't believe it can sustain either. Now, if elected, I will take an oath to uphold and defend the Missouri Constitution, the Constitution of the United States. I intend to do this faithfully and accurately, and will conduct myself accordingly, understanding that our government is limited. Thank you.
Also from the 159th District, Mr. Jerry Sparks could not be here today. He sent his apologies and regrets due to a work conflict. Unfortunately, a prepared statement was not able to be received in time to be read here today. Got to be smarter than the smartphone. With the 160th District, Mr. Ben Baker could also not be here today, but he sent the following statement that I will read verbatim on his behalf. Hello, my name is Ben Baker. My name is not Ben Baker, but I think you understand. And I'm running as a Republican for state representative of the 160th District. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Zaromsky and all those involved in putting together this forum. It's important for voters to be informed of candidates and the values they are running on. I also want to thank all of you who are here today for being engaged in the elective process. Unfortunately, because of a prior commitment, I could not attend today, but let me just take a moment to give you some understanding of my candidacy. I'm a fourth-generation minister and a fifth-generation carpenter by trade. I believe in hard work and clean living. I'm an instructor and dean of students at Ozark Bible Institute and have been active in serving others most of my adult life in some capacity. Missions work is also a passion of mine where I've had the privilege to be involved in places like Africa, India, and Central America. I'm the president of the board at CareNet Pregnancy Resource Center here in Neosho, where we defend the right to life on a daily basis. I own a small construction business where I practice a trade that was taught to me by my father at an early age. I also have a distinct privilege and honor of serving as the mayor of Neosho, where I have a record of leadership. I am running for state representative because I believe we need people who are tied to the principles of our Constitution and tied to the people that they represent. Serving the people with character and integrity has been and will continue to be my #1 priority. As your next state representative, I will work hard to cut government regulation and make small business great again. I will relentlessly cultivate a climate of liberty and free market economics. I will always uphold our state's constitution and fight for excellence in education at every level because education is the backbone of our communities and the future of our nation. Being 100% pro-life, I will always protect the value of life and fight against abortion services. I have and will continue to defend religious liberty and the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. I have and will continue to contend for the Second Amendment constitutional right to bear arms. Most of all, I will listen and respond to the people and fight for your values in Jefferson City. I have a record of proven leadership in times of crisis, a willingness to fight for what is right, and I would like to invite you to join the movement to send a competent conservative leadership to the Missouri State House. Please take time to visit our webpage at benbaker4mo.com, and I would love to earn your vote on November 6th. Don't forget to win with Ben. Out of respect for his statement, please join me in giving him a round of applause. In the 160th District, we do have the privilege of Miss Angela Thomas, Democratic candidate, here to introduce herself. Ms. Thomas?
Thank you, Keith. I would like to thank, first of all, Crowder for hosting this today. It's an honor to be here and an honor to meet all of you. I hope to, at some point, be able to represent you at Jefferson City. My name is Angela Thomas, and I am running for state representative in District 160. I come from 3 generations of family farmers and ranchers here in Southwest Missouri. My father was a 20-year veteran from the United States Air Force and a retired postal carrier and a rancher as well. My mother has a 33-year business here in Neosho, Thomas Accounting and Tax Services. Some of you may know her. I've lived in Neosho for the last 29 years. This is my home. District is my home, as well as McDonald County in Southwest Missouri. I've had 16 years working with the Newmac Electric utility company here in Neosho, and for the last 15 years I've owned my own business, Angela's Salon and Day Spa, here in Neosho. This is, as I said, this is my home, and I care about the people in the district, and I wanted to let you know that I believe as a representative, my job is to serve and to listen to the people in this district with honesty and integrity, and regardless of whatever party that you belong to. I feel that we share many core values, and one of the values that I feel we share is higher education and quality education. I will support policies that fully fund the formula for K through 12 and for funding for secondary schools as well as vocational education. I feel that a highly educated and well-trained workforce is vital and a key to our strong economy. I will also support fair wages for our teachers and resources for our teachers, and I will fight to support and to protect the pensions for the retired teachers. Another shared value that I think that we all have is our care for our seniors. And over the last several years, this has diminished greatly in the state of Missouri. I feel that our seniors should be allowed to live dignified and productive lives. I will support policies that protect the Social Security. I will support policies that stop the cuts in Medicaid and Medicare. The state chose not to expand Medicare, which costs $17.8 billion to our state over the next 10 years. And I will support funding for our home health care and for prescription drugs for elders. I don't feel that anyone should have to make the choice whether to buy groceries or buy their medicine. And I feel that this is a value we can all share. We also share the values of stronger infrastructure. I am supporting Proposition D, which our Republican Governor Parson supports, as well as Lieutenant Governor Keogh. This is a bipartisan effort to maintain our roads and bridges. And Missouri is the 7th largest in number of miles in the nation, but we are the 4th from the bottom in maintaining in tax revenue that maintains our highways and our roads. So I also want to fight to keep that local tax revenue here local to help with our roads and bridges and repairs and maintenance. A good infrastructure attracts businesses, families, and industry to our area. I also feel that we all share the values of agriculture. I am from a family ranch families. Missouri is a proud agricultural state. We're second only to Texas in the cattle ranching, and 99% of the U.S. farms are owned and operated by families. Crowder College is very active in their ag business and their ag support. And I support policies that will empower the next generation to continue with the Missouri agricultural history. I'm very proud of Crowder College. I am a graduate of Crowder College from and I support what they've done here, and thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak with you today.
From the Missouri Senate's State Senate 32nd District race, we have in alphabetical order Conan Gillis, who could not be here today due to employment, but has sent a representative from his campaign. His wife, Ms. Gillis, will now present on his behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Zaromsky, and thank all of you for coming to hear about how your candidates in the upcoming election feel about issues that are important to you. Being an informed voter is very important, and I'm glad to see you all here today. And also thank you to Crowder for hosting this event. Crowder College holds a pretty special place in our family and in our campaign team. Conan's dad graduated from here whenever Conan was just a little guy, thanks to a very generous scholarship that he had to the pre-engineering program. And from there, he was able to continue his education and his career and then support his 3 sons in theirs. And also Kayla, which is Conan's campaign manager, and myself, we're Upward Bound students here at Crowder, and so we've been able to reap a lot of benefits, and they helped us on our educational and career journey, and I'm very passionate about the fact that if not for the resources that our families and our campaign team have received through this campus, that none of us would have the careers and the education that we have today. So I'm really glad to be here to reflect on that and to see the changes in campus since the last time I was here. And I actually have a letter from Conan to read to all of you. Thank you so much to Crowder and Mr. Zaromsky for hosting this event and the invitation to speak. I'm sorry that I'm unable to attend because I'm currently teaching social studies to my own students at Neosho High School. And from the beginning of my campaign, I told myself that education and my students would take precedence. For the last 7 years, I have taught history and government at Neosho High School, and during that time, I emphasized the importance of American ideals like liberty, equality, the Bill of Rights, and of course, voting. By 2016, I had many students sold on how important it was to vote. Many followed the 2016 election energetically and couldn't wait for their turn to vote in future elections. On election day, I brought in sample ballots for the kids to see how the process worked. Many were excited and looked down the list, and as they reached the state level positions, they noticed one name only ever appeared. And many asked, "Mr. Gillis, why is there only one name listed?" After explaining what running unopposed meant, many said, "So they're going to win and there's no point in voting." It was like democracy and what I had taught them died all in one moment. Later, I researched past elections and discovered that the Missouri Senate 32 elections had unopposed races all the way back to 2006, and before that it was the early 90s. I imagined over 10 years of voters and students looking at these ballots and thinking there's no point in voting. I realized that I would hit the minimum age of 30 to run for this office only days before the election, and it seemed obvious no one else was willing to create an actual democracy in our area. So I would take that plunge. I would give my students and area voters around the district a reason to vote, because one name on a ballot will never be the democracy that our country was founded upon. Since I'm still teaching in Missouri Public Schools at this very moment and have a family filled with educators, I've seen where our education system can be improved, including breaking the large amount of time, money, and energy that we currently put towards standardized testing in our schools, creating and expanding programs designed to help students, such as Upward Bound, the A+ Scholarship Program, English Language Learners Programs, special education, and more. We also need to put more emphasis on mental health in our schools to combat the rising issue of teen depression, suicide, and school violence. Turning 30 just days before the election also makes me the youngest person to run for Missouri State Senate in our state's history. I believe that sending someone with a fresh set of ideas and energy is exactly what our government needs right now. I've always taught my students that our country and government is supposed to work toward certain ideals, and I intend to uphold those at all costs. Things like liberty, the Bill of Rights, equality, and government officials acting honestly, putting the people above their own interests and parties. This is why I chose not to run as a Democrat or Republican. It seems many of these politicians are more focused on defeating the other side and standing with their party than on what is right for regular people. Thank you.
I now invite to the podium Ms. Carolyn McGowan, Democratic candidate for the 32nd Missouri State Senate.
Thank you for having me, and I would thank Crowder for this opportunity. My affiliation with Crowder has been through theater. You have a great theater department, and I've done several shows here and make sure that I get that. But I also appreciate the fact that you have your renewable energy programs and your sustainable agricultural programs, and I like everything you're doing. I like to see students that I have had get to come here on the A+ program and get an an opportunity they probably couldn't get to have. So I really appreciate Crowder. My name's Carolyn McGowan. I am 76 years old, and that means I have a kind of a long resume. That's what happens when you get old. And it's in a little flyer, so I won't bore you with it. But I have been in government service. Before, I was served, 3 sessions on the Webb City City Council. And as Mayor Pro Tem, I ended up being mayor because the mayor died, and I ended up doing, and I got a lot accomplished. My term was up, but there was a lot of things I wanted to get done, and I was able to do that for the short time I was mayor. I'm currently, and have been, on the Webb City Library Board. I'm serving my 3rd term. We have term limits, so I think this is my last term. And I've also been elected by my party, which is the Democrat Party, to serve as a delegate. Of the 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders state delegate. But I'd worked on the campaigns before that. I'm basically a teacher. I like to say I'm an actress, but my main thing is I'm a teacher. I think there's a big correlation between them. I think all really good teachers are actresses. In other words, you can't be boring. You need to motivate your class. So I see a big correlation in that. But I went to the University of Kansas. In fact, all of my education is from Kansas. I graduated from KU in 1964, and with a bachelor's degree in elementary. I went back in education. I went back and got my master's at Pitt State University when I was 37 years old, and that was so long ago that they didn't have early childhood education at that time, and they didn't even have it. But anyway, I decided, well, I didn't actually decide, my husband decided. I complained about my salary so much that he decided that he was going to trick me to get me to start my own business. So it was summer, I'd already signed my contract at Carl Junction, and he brought me a gin and tonic, and I go, well, thank you. And then he brought me another one, and I said, what are you up to? And he said, I want you to resign from teaching and start your own business because I'm tired of you complaining about the fact, he made 3 times more than I did. And I had a master's and he didn't. So anyway, he said, you start your own business. And he said, I'll support you for 1 year, but that's all. And you decide what you want to do. So I spent that whole year, that was in 1982, traveling around Missouri working on the Equal Rights Amendment. And a year later, he said, hey, your year's up. You need to do something. So I decided to start a preschool. And I got really, and oh my gosh, I'd had older children. I'd had 6th graders. And these were people puppies. They were great. So that's what I learned all about early childhood. And I went back and got certified in it. And that's what I would, probably my biggest concerns, if elected, I would like to work on education curriculum. Now, I need to say my platforms. My platforms are, number 1, education. Number 2, equality, and 3 is healthcare. In education, I totally agree. We've got too much testing, too much in technology. And we were talking about the Constitution. They combined civics, geography, and history into one class called social studies. Well, guess what? All 3 of them are being neglected now. I don't see kids learning map studies. I don't see them really hitting history or the Constitution enough because they've combined those subjects. That sounds like maybe we're trying to do too much, but I think at the lower level, they are doing too much. I don't think 5-year-olds should even be in school all day. I was totally against all-day kindergarten, but they're there, and as long as they have that, I want to make sure that they are not asked to be quiet all day long. That is impossible of a 5-year-old. They need to be talking, they need to be developing verbal skills. So education's my main thing. Oh, I told you. I would talk forever. Anyway, I would appreciate your vote. I saw with Conan, one of the reasons I wanted to run was that we needed choices. And as a Democrat, I haven't had that choice for a long time on many ballots. So that was my slogan, Southwest Missouri needs a choice. So thank you for having me.
Our last candidate is current Representative Mr. Bill Wright, who is running for the 32nd District on the Republican ticket.
You know, it's really nice to have somebody else get buzzed for talking too long, because I always do that. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank Crowder, of course, for hosting this. But this is important that you guys are here, whether you're here because your class wants you to be here for an assignment, or because you're interested in meeting us, hearing about what our points of view are. If you vote, you have an important decision to make in November. If you don't vote, you should. I'm Bill White. I'm running for the Missouri Senate, 32nd District. My parents were blue collar. My dad drove a truck and ran the county truck farm. My mom worked a proof machine in the bank. My parents didn't stay together. They got divorced, and I put myself through my last year of high school by myself and my first year and a half of college. By the way, it was at a junior college, Johnson County Community College. Excellent basic education to get me to move on later. I quit college to go into the Marines. I was in the Marines for 4 years. During that time, I married my wife, Ellen Nichols. She was the younger sister of my best friend. And we've been married going on 44 years now. I'm very pleased to say that. When I got out of the Marines, I went back to school on the GI Bill. I went to the University of Kansas, and I had a BA degree. I continued on at the University of Chicago. I have a master's in Soviet area studies. Started a PhD program. My wife was in medical school and residency, so we needed some money. So I went to work for the electric company in Northern Illinois, doing something I'd never done before. Did some in-house training and started designing software to build nuclear plants. I really enjoyed that. It was a really fun job, but I like to learn. So I started going to an evening law school, John Marshall. They have a program for professionals. Ultimately, I got my law degree from Washburn University in Topeka, Kansas. I've done a lot of things in my life, as you can kind of tell. Marines, I've designed software for traffic control. I was a juvenile attorney in Jasper County. Did a lot of abuse and neglect, guardian ad litem work for the courts. And did a lot of things in my community. I've been a Boy Scout leader, a swim team president, a swim league president, a USA stroke and turn judge in the past. Done lots of different things. When we started out doing community involvement, and with my legal career, one of the things we realized is that there's a lot more that can be done with juveniles than just what was happening with me being able to provide guardian ad litem work or else being the attorney for the juvenile office. So my wife and I became adoptive foster parents. We adopted 2 of our 4 children. A wonderful experience, sometimes trying, but again, a very wonderful experience. To tell you a little bit about my background in politics, before 2009, I hadn't ran for anything. Well, I was on the Park and Recs board for Joplin, which really wasn't running. I was just asked to do that, and so I did. I'm a Republican. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm a conservative. But that doesn't mean that I just vote the way the party votes. If a bill's wrong, if it's unfair, if it affects people unjustly, if it favors one group over another, I fight to change that bill, and if I can't change it, I fight to kill it. It's very important, I think, that you have someone who can analyze independently and understand what the legislation is. I have a reputation in the House for being one of the few people up there that actually reads almost all the bills. I say almost all because sometimes it's just impossible. We have about 2,000 bills up there at probably the biggest time, but anything that reaches the floor where we're voting on, I'm known for reading it. And not only just reading it, but trying to understand it and analyze it. Being a lawyer helps that quite a bit. For my platforms, I'm endorsed by Missouri Right to Life. I am very pro-life. And I am way behind here. So I'm going to run through really quickly. I'm also endorsed by the National Rifle Association. And I have fought for smaller government. My first bill I ever did was reducing the size of government by getting rid of a bunch of obsolete and no longer valid statutes. I believe in economic growth, but economic growth for everyone, not just for those few people who are rich. Do want to point out, in my 8 years, I am one of the very few people in the House that has taken 0 lobbyist gifts. Bill Wright, your current representative, was also one of the other ones. I think it's important. You need to have legislators that have integrity. You would think they all would, but there's a lot of pressure in Jeff City for people to do things, self-serving political interests, and so I think it's important. You should be able to send people up there that are ethical, that can be ethical without it being a law. And I think that's probably pretty good. Good timing. Thank you.
With that, at this time, we invite you to, if you have a question, not required, but you may write it out on your note card. You may address it to one candidate if it would be someone that you would be able to specifically vote for, or you can write them to all candidates. For those of you who already are the good students and already wrote your question out, you may raise them up and Mr. Dethridge will help collect them. He's going to bring them up to my division colleagues. And while you're doing that, I do want to direct your attention to the bottom of the program. I'd like to take this opportunity as you're writing to thank our Constitution Week partners. The Lee Library and the Friends of the Lee Library have provided the pocket constitutions that were handed out to you at the door. I don't know if any are still left, but if they are, you're welcome to take one on your way out. The Office of Campus Life has helped us with our Constitution Movie Week series. The Public Information Office has helped us with all of our graphics and outreach. Crowder Speech and Debate, as shared, will be on Tuesday and Thursday on campus debating 2 constitutional questions. And my colleagues within the Social Science Division, Dr. Clymer, Dr. Schiffler, Mr. Ron Cole, and all of the adjuncts who helped spread the word within their classes as well. With that, I'll wait until my colleagues bring me the first question, and then we will go from there. Our candidates will remain seated. The microphones are set to kind of catch up everything, so you don't have to get real friendly and lean in type of situation. A recent federal appeals court ruling weakened Missouri's already weak campaign finance laws. Campaign finance laws provide transparency and equality in representation. How will you help strengthen campaign finance laws in the state of Missouri? For this first question, we'll start with Mr. Deaton, work our way down. The next question will start with Mr. White, and we'll randomize in between so everyone has a chance to be answering a question for the first time. Mr. Deaton, what say you?
Okay, so I'm assuming we're referring to the 8th Circuit with the Amendment 2. I don't know if anyone, whoever wrote the question, if I'm getting that wrong, please correct me. But that a district judge had actually already ruled on that, and the appeals court affirmed that ruling. Amendment 2, which was constitutional amendment passed in 2016, prohibited political action committees' PAC-to-PAC contributions. So a political action committee could not write a check contribution to another political action committee, and the 8th Circuit affirmed the district court ruling that was not appropriate and not constitutional, which is what this day is about. I think that it would be interesting to have the debate, I suppose, as to if we want to have money in politics or not. The question is, it's there, and I don't think that's going to change. And I think there is a First Amendment issue. I think that it is a form of speech. And so it's going to be there, it's going to be allowed. The question is, how best do we do that? And in my mind, Amendment 2 was actually a step in the wrong direction. And the reason it was, if you look at 2018, this midterm cycle, contributions to campaigns here in the state of Missouri, I don't think we've seen any decrease in the number of contributions, the number of money spent in politics. What we have seen is a lack of transparency, because now these political action committees have sprung up versus someone just writing a check to an individual candidate like me. You go look at the MEC, the Missouri Ethics Commission, see who contributed to my campaign. Now that there's limits on those contributions, it's not as transparent. So you have political action committees. We don't know where they got their funding in many sources. You have on the federal level 501c4s who are getting involved. We don't know where that's coming from. So the transparency is gone, and I don't think that's good for anyone.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Is it okay to repeat the question?
Yes. How will you help strengthen campaign finance laws in the state of Missouri?
Well, this is something that I haven't thought a whole lot about, other than when trying to raise campaign funds to run a campaign. It's very expensive. But I do feel like we do need to put some regulation on special interest groups that are have more money than others, and give those to campaigns in a less than transparent way. And as far as how I would stop that, we would just need to sit down work across the aisles and discover the ways that we can stop some of this. We just need less big money for the smaller candidate. I feel that the candidates many times will get to a position when running for office that has been aided because of the extra money that they've received from larger interest groups. So transparency, I think, is one of the major things that we need to work upon, and honesty within that those ranges of who is donating to your campaign. It would just be something that we'd have to sit down and work with one another on, and everybody needs to be fair with it and transparent with how it's being done.
Thank you. Ms. Gillis?
I know that Conan supports initiatives to remove special interest monies and PAC monies from campaigns. Conan feels very strongly that if a PAC or special interest group cuts you a check for a high dollar amount, that doesn't come with no strings attached. And so it's important that whenever your elected officials go into office, that they go there owing no favors to organizations and groups, but that they can go there to represent you and your vote and your voice. So I believe, go ahead.
No.
So I believe Conan would be looking to, again, like Angela said, working across the aisle to work toward legislation that would help promote removing corporate money and PAC money from campaigns and promoting that transparency in those campaigns.
Thank you. Ms. McGowan?
Well, I would agree completely about large contributions means, yes, there's a price tag with it. And this is the first time I've dealt with the Missouri Ethics Commission, but they are it's extremely strenuous, and they are keeping track, and I think that's good. I would love to see no money in politics, because money in politics puts the Democrat Party at a huge disadvantage. I mean, we just don't have a lot of money. But it would be great if everybody got equal airtime, or if everybody got equal certain amount of things. I know you need to contribute, but I would like to see less money in campaigns. I had no idea they were this expensive. So anyway, but I think that's what we do to have democracy. We all have to spend a little bit of money. So.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Well, I agree with transparency. I think that the changes we had in 2016 that put limits back on makes it very untransparent. We've had elections in the past for the Senate district just north of us where one of a particular individual in Joplin donated $250,000 to that individual's campaign, which they then spent under their own control. That was very clear, ethics filed, everybody saw it. Now you can spend $2,600 is all you can donate. Any other money that individual wanted to spend would have to go to a PAC. Those of you who followed my race, I dealt with about $225,000 in PAC money, which was very difficult to trace as to where it came from. Some was, some wasn't. Transparency is key. I think part of removing a cap is allowing transparency. People will donate to your campaign. Plus, in your campaign, you are responsible for the ads that are ran. You're responsible for the things that come out. A PAC will be supporting an individual or an issue, but there's not a personal connection. There cannot be, by federal law and state law, between a candidate and a PAC. There can be no collusion or cooperation whatsoever. So I do disagree that there's only money on one side of the political spectrum. When you look at donations, it's across the board. I think money is part of free speech. Money is political speech. Political donation is free speech. I'm an attorney. You can look at a lot of Supreme Court cases going way back that say that. I think we need to have a transparency. I think part of that, in my preference, would be that we lose our campaign limits and we wouldn't need PACs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Mr. White and then work down to Mr. Deaton. Question for all candidates. What is your stance on carry and conceal for college campuses? Mr. White?
I think if you're a law-abiding citizen and you have a right, you're of age, you meet all the criteria, that you have the right to carry a concealed carry on campus, yes. We passed that, we passed open carry, constitutional carry, if you will call it. I prefer carry where you actually get a license. I support constitutional carry, but you are an individual. If you have a right, and I believe it's a constitutional right, if you have done nothing wrong, you have done no criminal violation to not carry concealed, the university doesn't have the right to say you can't. By the way, University of Kansas has signs on their building that say no open carry in the building. So to say that if there's going to actually be concealed carry allowed on campuses, that terrible things will happen, I think history doesn't prove that out. Thank you.
Ms. McGowan?
So Kansas does have,
Yeah, the sign when you go in the door.
yeah. There's a sign on my dance studio door, I didn't get to that, it says that no weapons are allowed. And I want my right protected to say that if I have a private business, that I cannot allow guns in my building. And I guess I'm trying to say, no, I'm opposed to any guns on campus. I'm support Second Amendment rights, but I think the more guns you have in the environment, the more they're going to have problems. I've been terrified for teachers and students of the school shootings I've seen, and I didn't even get to this, but I am very, very, very much concerned about good gun legislation. I've been endorsed by Moms Demand Action as a gun sense candidate. So I will be working for any legislation that protects students and teachers and in any level of schools. So yes, I would be against that.
Thank you. Ms. Gillis?
Conan is also recognized as a gun sense candidate through Moms Demand Action, and what Conan really likes about that organization is that they are pro-Second Amendment. It is about protecting your Second Amendment right, and it's about working within the Second Amendment to make sure that we are sharing the goal that I'm sure all of us can agree on despite party lines, which is keeping our students and our faculty and our staff and our communities safe. So you can work within the Second Amendment to still protect that right and also make sure that we aren't adding that we aren't adding to an already potentially dangerous environment. And so I believe that Conan would be opposed to open carry or concealed carry on campuses, but he is very much for protecting students by resource officers, excuse me, I couldn't think of the word. Student resource officers being on campus and potentially them being armed to protect students. But as far as any old person being able to show up on campus with a firearm, the research shows that the more firearms in a situation, the more opportunity for someone to get hurt unlawfully and unjustly. So I believe Conan would be opposed to that.
Ms. Thomas?
I too am a gun owner. I believe in responsible gun laws. I am opposed to carrying on campus. I agree with Ms. Gillis in the idea that resource officers should be armed, but teachers and students, I don't feel that's necessary. And I do feel that it could add to a more dangerous situation in the event that there should be some kind of an occurrence on the campus and security be called in from outside of the campus. How will they know which person is the good guy with the gun and which person is the bad guy with the gun? And I think that it just offers an opportunity for dangerous situation and that puts the students and the teachers in an unsafe environment. I also am opposed to teachers being armed for the very fact that they are teaching our children, nurturing our children, and should not be responsible to take the life of one of their students should the situation arise.
Thank you. Mr. Deaton?
So if you desired to conceal and carry here at Crowder College, here where you sit, I would support you in doing that. And I think that would be the right and the appropriate thing to do. You know, the bad guys are always going to have the guns. So not allowing the honest, the upstanding, upright citizens to have them, I think is probably going in the wrong direction. And I certainly support school resource officers as well. I see we have an officer here with us today, and I think that's fantastic. But just think, is there one currently in L.C. Plaster? Is there one in Newton or McDonald Hall? Let's say you were in one of those classrooms and it was a desperate situation that no one would ever want to find themselves in. I wouldn't be for forcing you to conceal and carry, for forcing your instructor to conceal and carry, but if you want to exercise what I believe is a constitutional right in that regard, then I think you should be able to do that, understanding that I hope no one ever finds themselves in that situation. But you know what? If I ever found myself in that situation, I'd like to have a concealed and carry weapon on my person. Whether or not I decide to use it in that instance, I'd have to wait, and we'd cross that bridge when we came there. But again, I don't think taking weapons from good law-abiding citizens in any circumstance is really the right approach.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, you'll receive our next question, then we'll go to Mr. Deaton, and then down our state Senate candidates. This question is for all candidates. In your opinion, what does Missouri's future look like considering marijuana? Are we moving towards medical, recreational? What is your view on it? Ms. Thomas?
Thank you. In my opinion, I believe we are moving toward medical marijuana. There are 3 issues on the ballot for 2018. My opinion of the issue is that I think that medical marijuana is probably something that we should look into. I know that there are many other drugs that are legal and for medical uses that are probably a lot worse than marijuana. As far as the research, I think that the research needs to be done, and that if you had a child, if I had a child that had epilepsy and marijuana was the drug that would help that child, then I would be seeking to use marijuana for that child, as I feel many of you would as well. So I think we are moving that direction. I think there's 30 other states at this point that do have legalized marijuana, and I do believe that regulated properly and used for medical reasons, I would be for it.
Thank you. Mr. Deaton?
Well, there are 3 amendments that you'll be voting on November 6th, constitutional amendments regarding medical marijuana, and even for the most ardent supporters, at least one of those is just terribly written, which begs the whole question of initiative petition reform, but I realize that's not the question, and I'm certainly not trying to dodge the question. So I would say you're going to ultimately, in some form or fashion, going to get to make that decision yourself on the ballot if you exercise your right to vote, and I think that's appropriate. I have a great respect of the sanctity of a doctor-patient relationship, and I agree. I think there's things with like the cannabis oil that with seizures and epilepsy that seems to be just a great leap forward from current treatments, and I think that they can take the THC down or basically eliminate it, which is kind of the intoxicating variant of cannabis, and it has some medical uses, and so I wouldn't necessarily look to interfere with that. But again, I would just say that this is something you're going to get to make your voice heard on here very shortly when you go to the ballot box, and that's going to dictate the policy here in the state of Missouri going forward in all likelihood.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Well, we have passed in the legislature several years ago CBD oil for pediatric epilepsy. It's prescription, that's legal now. It's not a prescription per se, it's because it's not sold through pharmacies. We actually passed in the House of Representatives this year, did not go through the Senate, a medical marijuana bill, if you will. It is not what you see out there on the ballots. It's not smoking, it was a lozenge. It is a carbon copy of the CDC's clinical trials that are currently ongoing. The CDC estimates 3 to 4 years for probably derivatives of marijuana to become actual prescription drugs, which would then be prescribed by your physician through a pharmacy. There was a lot of debate on the floor, but we passed it out of the House. The Senate did not take it up. Again, this is a lozenge. It's not recreational. It doesn't get you high. It doesn't smoke. If you want real medical marijuana, opioids, you can smoke opium. We don't smoke opium. We have it in pill form for medicine. Same thing with marijuana. It becomes a medicine, a standardized quality form, which what we passed would require the companies that would set this up, if it would have passed, would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment, very strict testing limits. It would have been true medical marijuana, not where you get to go pick out your little bunches in a store with a little ticket.
Thank you. Ms. McGowan?
Yes, I am in favor of Missouri's the first proposition for making medical marijuana legal in Missouri. I have a very dear friend whose granddaughter has epilepsy, and she is hoping for this. I see this helping children, and I think it's far less dangerous than what we're getting people on the opioid drug. So I see this as a good alternative. I'm in favor of the first proposition.
Thank you. Ms. Gills, sorry. Continue.
Conan is also in favor of legalization for medical use in Missouri, especially as in Missouri we are facing the opioid crisis, and I remember as I was growing up we were facing an amphetamine crisis, and that's not just limited to prescription drug misuse. People start on prescription drug misuse often and then turn to street drugs. And if we can replace opioid medication with medical marijuana, which is proven to be safer, then we can curb not just prescription drug misuse, but a lot of the street drug addiction that we see here in Missouri.
Thank you. Our next question goes to all candidates. What will you do to protect low-income Missouri students from exorbitant student loan debt? We'll start with Ms. Gillis and continue down the line.
Conan is in favor of forgiving student debt. There is some research out there to support how this can give back to the community and the economy. There was research done regarding the GI Bill, and what they found was for every dollar spent invested in veterans going to school, forgive me if I'm quoting this incorrectly, but I believe it was 79 cents returned in economic growth and like infrastructure. And so if we can replicate that on a larger volume, if we saw that much just with our veterans using the GI Bill, if we can replicate that on a larger level, then we can encourage students to contribute to the economy, contribute to our communities by purchasing homes, which stimulates the economy, starting families, which stimulates our communities, because right now students are leaving, as you know, with crippling debt that's preventing them from contributing to our communities and our economy in very, very real ways.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Well, I do feel that students are graduating from college with an exorbitant amount of debt and hard for them to get their lives started. And I do feel that we need to focus more on funding some of the secondary education, trade schools, and VOTEC schools. Not every student that graduates from high school is going to go to college, and so we need to have some other choices for them as far as training and getting out into the workforce. But I am in favor of reducing that debt for those when they graduate from school, from college. It's hard to make a living with that type of a debt over your head. They start out already in a hole before they can even start their lives. So I am for lowering that cost, and if there's some program that's worked out for debt forgiveness or for just lowering the cost of getting more resources and more funding for those students when they first sign up for college.
Thank you. Mr. Deaton?
So I certainly wouldn't be for any intervention at the state level in this regard, and perhaps it's a bit of admittingly a contrarian view, but I think the federal involvement in federally guaranteed student loans can be attributed to at least partially to the rises in costs. I mean, if you look at things that have far outpaced the rate of inflation over the last several decades, sectors like healthcare and education would certainly be the largest. And then you contrast those with the great innovations of, say, the free market, things like cell phones and televisions. In one, we've seen dramatic rises in costs. In the others, like TVs, we've seen a drastic drop in cost. And the biggest difference that I see is in a few of those sectors, the government's heavily involved, and they're not in the others. And so it is unfortunate, and I think it's regrettable that people in some instances graduate from college, as I say, with a mortgage, and they don't get the house. And that's unfortunate. I do congratulate, I think you all here are very, you should be commended because you're here at Crowder College, which is very, very much focused, I know, on student affordability. And I think it's realistic that one can work their way through Crowder, through Southern, through many of our great state institutions. And not to say it's easy, but it can be done. And I think that's something that is to be commended for you all taking that approach.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Well, I would start off by saying if you just do a forgiveness program, someone pays. That someone that pays is every taxpayer in the state if we're talking on a state level. We do things now to help with the cost of school. We have an A+ program. We have, in our professional schools, we have, if you go to be a nurse, you can get loans, you can get some subsidies that you then pay back by working in underserved areas for a certain period of time where the state is actually benefiting. There's programs like that. We have work study at different universities, and we have the GI Bill, which was mentioned. That wasn't a freebie. I was in the Marines for 4 years to earn my GI Bill. That was something that I gave. That was on a federal level. There was a personal responsibility in going to school. I mentioned my last year of high school, my first year and a half at a community college. I had a full-time job. I carried 12 hours. That's all I could carry. There is a personal responsibility in there, and to say that it should be paid for by society for everyone to be able to go to school is kind of the exaggeration or the far extension of what was asked is not correct. There is an element of responsibility. I think the state we are involved in things. A+ is a great program. Our professional forgiveness programs are really good for loans and for actual scholarships where we need healthcare, we need nurses. We do the same thing on physician level also. But on nurse levels, a BA level, that's a program. There are programs that help the state with providing essential services. Those are definitely good forgiveness programs, but to just have a blanket, you're out of debt for going to school, I could not support.
Thank you. Ms. McGowan?
I'm in favor of forgiveness for incentives, like the GI Bill, or my husband went to college on the GI Bill. Years ago, I went to when I was at KU, they had the student defense loan, and I left KU owing $7,000, which that was a lot of money then. It's not now. I think they probably spend that in a semester. But I was able to cancel, I had 10 years to pay it off, and I was able to cancel up to 5 payments if I taught school, which I did. And each year I taught, I made a payment, and I had it paid off in 5 years. So I think there should be incentives for community service, or in other words, we will offset your loans if you serve us. And I don't think that's a waste of taxpayers' money if you're paying for something that they're serving for you to do. I think the loans are outrageously high. I think the interest rates are too high. And I personally would like to see, we have an obligation to educate children. We pay for that because to have a democracy, you have to educate people. Well, it takes more than 12 years now. With the way technology's advanced and what people need to do. So I would like to see free or publicly funded, 2 years of either trade school or junior college by the state.
Thank you. Starting with Ms. McGowan. Many citizens in this area are small business owners. How will you benefit and support small business owners?
Well, I am a small business owner, and I talk so long I never did tell you what that business I started was, and it was a preschool and then a dance studio. And what I would like to see, if I was looking at how it would protect me, is in making sure that the government is not telling me who I can restrict. And this is, in Kansas, I was talking about that earlier. I am not allowed to forbid guns in my business. In other words, in Missouri, I can forbid to forbid. In Kansas, that's not, and I think that's in the legislature now. I would like for businesses to be able to be in control of what happens inside that business. If I go down to City Hall and it says no guns allowed, why can they say that and I cannot? That's one of the things I would like to do. Also, as far as small business, I've always been a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I think, we put this thing out, shop locally, do this, and I try to get to make people understand that we don't have the, and I want to tell people, make sure what you purchase is made in this country. I'm very, very adamant about that. So, that's about all I can think of now.
Thank you. Ms. Gillis?
Unfortunately, this is not a question that's come up with Conan while I've been around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note of that question. And whoever asked that question, please, 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 I encourage you to take one of the RAC cards and business cards that are on the table over there. Conan's contact information is on those. And so please ask him that question yourself.
Thank you, and I will take this time that at the end of the event, there is a table with literature for those interested to be able to take that. Ms. Thomas?
Well, I too am a small business owner. I've owned my salon and day spa for 15 years, and really haven't had a whole lot of government problems as far as what I've had to do with my business, regulations and things that we've had to deal with. But I do think that some of the things that we can look at are minimum wage and expenses that the small businesses need to, or that they incur, and encourage contribution from getting a say-so from the business owners, looking at what their needs are and what the things that they're facing. I know as our business, it was small enough that I didn't have to pay minimum wage, but I did because that is something that, I feel that if you're not paying a minimum wage, then your employees are going to go someplace else where they can get a higher wage. I haven't had any problems that I had to face as a business person that were extremely strenuous regulations, and so I really don't know what issues we'd be looking at, but we'll certainly be willing to study those and get into, see what the solutions would be for that.
Thank you. Mr. Deaton?
I think this is a great question, and I've worked for small business here in our area. I've come from a family of small business owners, and jobs are not created in Jefferson City. We've talked about things, government programs, government spending. Where's that come from? It comes from the workers, the employers, the taxpayers of the state of Missouri. Government creates nothing. We sell no products. We make no revenue. All that we get is what we take from you. And so I'm really not for taking that much from you, quite frankly. I want to take as little as possible. But even if you're for that, you ought to want a great business climate, because the better the climate, the higher your tax revenues are going to be. So I still think we frankly have some ways to go, and we need to vigorously attack the litigation environment, which I think is kind of run amok here in this state. We need to look more at regulatory reform, and even need to continue to have the conversation on tax reform and what that looks like to make sure that we can continue to keep the jobs we have in this state and hopefully attract some new ones as well.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Well, two things. One, Mr. Deaton hit on it quite well, is taxes. The more money you get to keep in your business, no matter what size, the more your business is going to be able to prosper, grow, expand, as you see fit as a business owner. I think we've done a pretty good job with the last 8 years of doing that. Regulation is a problem. If you're a used car salesman in Missouri, until just this last session, you had to have a landline. Why? Why did you have to have a landline? Regulation. Somebody wrote it that way, 40 years ago when there were no such thing as cell phones. There's a lot of regulation that doesn't seem very much, but that costs hundreds of dollars a year for those people that have to have a landline. There's lots of weird regulations that are arcane that you don't seem to, why anybody ever created them. We need to get rid of those. Also, in a way of not spending, we need to get rid of corporate economic tax credits. We've bid out $400 million a year in large economic tax credits. Very few of them are available to any small business people. I think that's an unfair use of government resources. By that, it's money that we're not getting in to be able to utilize. So it puts more stress on those who are already taxpayers. And, another regulation, if we raise minimum wage, you are being told what you will pay your bottom line, what your employees, and that in small business often can be either putting them out of business, not expanding business. That is a business owner's, I think, prerogative dealing with their employees. A market will sort that out. If you do not take care of your employees well, you're not going to have high-quality employees. You're not going to then prosper as much as your competition.
Thank you. Now, prior to dismissing here today, because we have students that either have to leave or their class time is over, I want you to take note. No names were called, no insults were hurled, civility ruled the day. There's different opinions here in this room, yet we were able to do it in a respectful manner. And as the Social Science Division Chair of Crowder College, I just wanted to say that I'm very proud. I want to thank our candidates for being here, and I want to give them the opportunity before we conclude, in 1 or 2 sentences, one last thought, one last thing to leave you with. And I don't know their schedules. They may be available to visit with you afterwards. They may not. I ask you to respect that. We do have campaign literature in the back, but we'll start with Mr. White and work our way down the line with a last few sentence closing, just very briefly in a few sentences. Mr. White?
Well, thank you. I think that you need to know your candidates. Your candidates need to be available to you. You need to be able to call them on the phone. You need to be able to meet them face to face. It's the way I have been for 8 years, and we'll expand that into the Senate district. And I think integrity is very important. You need to look at the people you send up there in any race and understand their integrity level, their honesty level, because if you send honest people up there that have ethics, you're not going to need the legislation that we need up there. Thank you. And I would ask for your vote.
Thank you. Ms. McGowan?
Thank you very much. I would agree with all of that on integrity. And I think you need to be transparent. And I absolutely believe in absolutely no mudslinging. I think that I appreciate how we conducted ourselves today, everyone. And the last thing I didn't get to was my third platform, which is equality. And I wanted to share with you that I have marched for equality since college. First for civil rights, then for women's rights, most recently for gay rights. So if I'm elected, I will be supporting everyone of every race, religion, sexual preference, period. So that's my third platform. I talked so much I didn't get it in. Thank you for having me, and I would appreciate your vote.
Ms. Hills?
Thank you all for allowing me to be here to represent Conan in his campaign. I definitely encourage you all to get a hold of him. Again, his contact information are on the RAT cards and business cards. He gets back to everyone within 24 hours. And if you have any questions about his campaign or issues that are important to you, please contact him. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
I would just like to say, as your state representative, that I will fight for Southwest Missouri and for all sides with common sense solutions to all of our, for all of our citizens, and that I would ask for you to allow me to be your representative in Jefferson City, and I would like to be your voice in Jeff City.
Thank you. Mr. Deaton?
So what is the primordial purpose of our constitutions? It's not to limit you, it's to limit the government, which is why I intend to take the principles of limited government to Jefferson City so we can hopefully further unleash prosperity and protect your natural rights as free people. And that's why I'm asking for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you. Please join me in giving all of our candidates a round of applause. Thank you very much. We hope to see you at other Constitution Week activities this week. Have a great day.